Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Reviews video. I want to take you guys on just a very quick drive with me in this car. You and I have driven the i4 many times together, but we've actually only ever driven the top spec M50. This one is the 40 eDrive, and so that means it's rear wheel drive only. This one has the aero wheels. It's the range spec, and in my opinion the i4 is priced really well and competitively as a rear wheel drive variant. The problem is we've never driven the base one, so we got to see if this thing's worth it. Starting about $55,000 for a BMW big hatchback. I'll take you on a quick tour of it. We'll go through the specs, and then we're just going to drive it up and down the road. I only have a few minutes with this car, but I thought, okay, a lot of you have watched our i4 M50 reviews, and I gave you all the pros and cons. I thought it was an amazing daily driver, really wonderful car. I actually did like the styling quite a bit, even with the front grille situation. I think it actually it's growing on me. It looks good now. And I just didn't love the way it drove when I pushed it really hard. I hear, just from other journalists who are at this little BMW test drive event that I'm at, I hear this has a totally different character than the M50, and in a very positive, fun, old school BMW driving car kind of way. So let me take you on a quick tour of it, and then we'll go for our drive. You join me in beautiful California over here in Palm Springs, and this is the i4 40 eDrive, I believe, or is it eDrive 40? One way or another, you get the idea. It's the entry-level i4. It's eDrive 40. And this is my favorite bit about i4, is the hatchback. It's based basically on the combustion BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe. You can see it's got the included EVSE in the back here. It's a pretty good sizable space back here. It's a wonderful car. I really enjoyed the i450. I also really enjoyed the combustion version, which I spent quite a bit of time with as well, the M440i Grand Coupe. And I was like really wanting to check this thing out, and it was so hard to find a rear wheel drive one. I wish I had more time with it, because I'd love to do a range test and things like that, because the 50 really does cut down on the range, especially if you go with the big wheels in M Sport. So this is ultimate range spec right here, and looking pretty good. Let me just show you on the inside, and then of course I'll run you through some of the specifications. But here you go. I also just want to basically show you that this is not the maxed out trim. It does still have $10,000 worth of options, which I'll walk you through, but ultimately I think it's a pretty reasonable specification. It's a great way to get an idea of what this car is like in a less maxed out build. So let's jump in and go for a ride. And if you're curious about more like seating, front and rear, and reviews and all this stuff, take a look at other videos we've done on i4 across the channels. I've done some pretty in-depth reviews with this car. And very, very pro i4. I quite like this thing. So just as a reminder, I actually said this was the base trim. It's actually not. There is an eDrive 35 that has a smaller battery pack at an even less expensive price. Although I don't know if that's launched in America yet or planning to. You guys let me know in the comments if you've seen any of those. I haven't seen any of those hit our shores. So as far as I'm aware, this is the entry-level model, the eDrive 40, about 300 miles of range. The smaller battery pack's about 260 miles of estimated range, and then the M50, the all-wheel drive spicy one, drops it all the way to about 245 miles, and I think on the spicy wheels that we had, it was like 220 something. So this has almost 80 miles more range in the EPA cycle, and that had 530 horsepower. This has 330 horsepower. That's a big difference, but I still think we'll find this will be spicy enough. So let's jump in. I'll walk you through the options, and then we'll go for a drive in the i4 rear-wheel drive. I want to say a huge thank you to Magna for sponsoring this video. Guys, every week I thought it'd be pretty cool to highlight a specific Magna innovation, and in this case I want to talk about seats. Now, seats may not sound that interesting, but Magna's actually developed a really cool technology called freeform. Now, traditionally seat covers need to be stitched and sewed and hooked and looped in certain places whenever you want to tie down the material or have some sort of concave surface. But with the new innovation called freeform. The material itself can actually be molded to whatever shape you'd like. For example, take a look at this diamond pattern. When have you ever seen a fully embossed diamond pattern with no stitching? It's crazy. It's going to lead to the next generation of interior materials. I've actually even had a chance to try this out. And what's even crazier is the seat structure was the same as the factory OE spec. Freeform allowed the entire seat to feel and mold differently than the original seat. It was really crazy. Take a look at my reaction here. Let's see how this all... Okay, totally different, first of all. But it's the same seat structure.
It's the guts of the seat the production seat.
Whoa, totally different. So a huge thank you to Magna for sponsoring this video. We'll have a full in-depth video with Magna seating specifically on freeform coming to this channel very soon. I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you. And welcome to the inside of the i4 eDrive 40 with 19-inch wheels. So ultimate range spec here pretty much. What I've never done is driven this car, like I said. So I'm really looking forward to trying out the rear-wheel drive i4. You know, I drove the M50 for a couple weeks, really liked it, didn't love it. Like, the harder I pushed it, the less I liked it. And that was mostly, we shot a comparison review of Model 3 performance versus i4 M50 on a back canyon road. And there, I don't know, it just felt heavy and not totally optimized nicely. Now, I've heard some other people from this event say like, oh, you got to drive the rear-wheel drive i4. But also from a pricing standpoint, the i4 rear-wheel drive starts at $55,000. That's like middle of the road Model 3 money. The problem is you're going rear-wheel drive instead of all-wheel drive, which totally, I think, knocks it out of possibility for Colorado, where we live, New York, Connecticut. Now, most people, I think, would get away with snow tires and they'd be just fine, but I think modern mentality, especially with EVs, is dual motor for all-wheel drive. So I kind of wish BMW would make a middle ground between the eDrive 40 rear-wheel drive and the M50. I wish they would go for a 40 all-wheel drive version and just do a lower power front motor, for example. This one's optioned up with almost $10,000 worth of options, but it's kind of like you need this stuff. So all the driver assistance stuff, which will do the eye tracking, hands-free, up to about 35 or 40 miles an hour, that's $1,700. Parking Assist Plus is $700. That gives you surround view. It says it includes a rear view camera. I think legally that has to be standard, but I think they just put that there. Premium package is heated steering wheel, lumbar support, heated front seats, and ambient lighting. I mean, we're sort of in the lower end world of BMW, and not to say it's inexpensive, but $55,000 is a lot of money for you to have to spend a lot of money for ambient lighting. I don't know. It's $100 for the iconic electric sounds. It's $600 for the 19-inch Aero wheels. How about that? Wireless charging, curved displays, $1,000. Yeah, just seems like, okay, the prices just keep at, you know, it's a German car. You got to add the options. It's pretty much like you're into it for 60 minimum, I would say, to get a livable spec. Now, I'm really excited about this. So in terms of range, does it say what it's EPA rated for? I got to take a look. For final assemblies in Germany, which is pretty cool. And so it says 282 miles in the EPA cycle. That's much better than the i4. What's funny is we had the i4 M50 with the M Sport pack, and it was like rated way lower on range with those wheels than with other wheels, if I remember correctly. And yeah, it's got 48 amp onboard charger, I imagine. Let's see if we can find any of the electrical settings in here. So we're gonna go to menu, we're gonna go to, let's see if we can find it. I think it's under driving settings. There we go. Driving settings, charging. And yeah, you can go AC limit. Let's see what it goes up to. Pretty sure it's 48 amps. Yep, 48 amp onboard charger, 11, 12 kilowatts. That's fine. Charging target, what do they recommend? And 80%. Vehicle charges the fastest up to 80%. This is optimal for battery life and the fastest charging route. So I would recommend keeping yours set to 80% or lower every day. And so it's all pretty much the same as the i4 M50 here. So let's talk battery pack. It's about an 83 kilowatt hour battery pack, 81 usable, small buffers on this car. Typical BMW fashion. Notice the same thing with the BMW i7 that only has like a 3 or 4 kilowatt hour buffer on a much larger pack. So again, I recommend charging it to 80% or less every day just for overall lifespan. So this one has all the driver assistance in it. The seat itself is a really firm seat in this car, and I don't necessarily think that's a really bad thing, but you just get a BMW, everything's got some weight to it. It's firm. I love the seating position here. That, you know, when we start thinking about this versus a Model 3, that's what I want to talk about a lot, because I've done a couple 100,000 miles in Tesla Model 3s. I own one currently, and I think this is a you know, an interesting comparison, at least as a daily driver. And I'll let you know what I thought about the M50 as well. But let's just pull out of here. There's Rolls Royces everywhere. There's iX's, 7 Series, everything all around. So let's see if we can finagle our way out of this situation. Maybe I'll just go back to my charging spot and see if this guy can get out of here. But yep, we're gonna have to move. So let's head out for my first drive in the eDrive 40. First of all, it being a non-M Sport trim means that the steering wheel's really, I would say almost old school BMW, if you will, and I kind of like it. It's the old 3-spoke. Now, I really love the M Sport wheel that was in the M50, but I like this wheel. I think it's pretty good. Okay, so this is, I'm gonna go comfort mode, which is what it starts up in. It's the balance setting. RS6 Avant coming up the hill. That's spicy. And yeah, let me talk a little bit about at least where we left off with the M50. So up to this point, my only experience with this car has been the i4 M50, and did a lot with it. Spent a lot of time in the canyons, carving it, spent a lot of time charging it. It's one of those weird cars that requires 500 amps at a DC fast charger with low charging power. So same with this, you have to find the 350 kilowatt chargers to get the max speed out of it. Charges about 200 kilowatt peak, which isn't bad at all. That's sort of where BMWs are all coming in charging, because they're sticking with this 400 volt system architecture. Very interesting about the i4 is, as a daily driver, I thought it was tuned very nice, comfortable, great interior. I love the interior in this car. To me, a step above a Model 3 in terms of fit and finish and just the way that you sit in the car. However, there was a problem with the M50 that I had a really hard time getting over, which was every time I'd drive it hard, it was just so sharp, is the only way to describe it. The throttle tuning was you'd put your foot down and bam, you get smashed in the back, and you lift off and bam, you get smashed in the windshield. And you really had to drive around this almost drivetrain lash. And to me, it just, most people don't notice it and it wasn't a problem, but for me as like a input nerd when it comes to driving, it kind of left me with a little bit of a, okay, Model 3's just tuned way better for this kind of stuff impression. And so now I'm really lucky that I have the opportunity to go in the eDrive 40, the rear wheel drive. This is the range spec, almost 300 miles like I mentioned, and I'd love to do a range test on this one day. Perhaps we can meet back up with this car. I know they don't have many rear wheel drives in the media review fleet, or maybe one of you owns one and we can do a little video with it. But to me, the price is a lot more attractive, almost, you know, $10,000, $15,000 less than the rear wheel drive. Wow, pretty fast actually. And what's cool is it feels so light and nimble, like it wants to turn and have fun. So a very different character than the M50. The M50 seems like it was tuned to give you the impression that you're going fast, and this seems like, okay, it's tuned as a daily driver. Now I do hear a lot of road noise coming in. It's certainly not nearly as refined as you know, some of a higher end EV, but when we start talking about Model 3, okay, well, we're right in that category. Blended brake pedal feels pretty good. There's a drive and a B mode, as well as adaptive regen. So for example, here I have it in level 2 regen. In drive, it just gives me a little bit. If I move the shifter to the left, I get even more. Not nearly as much is my understanding as the normal all-wheel drive variants, because just the rear axle is doing the regen in this case. And so you can't just honk down on the rear axle with regen, because you might get some flip and slip, I should say. So I don't think this needs to be a really long video. What I really wanted to do was just get a quick impression of the rear wheel drive i4 after spending a lot of time with the M50. Certainly it doesn't feel as nice in this spec. It's a lower spec than the M Sport you know, M50 that we spent a lot of time with, and that had the wide fenders and it looked really cool. But ultimately, I don't think you're going to be giving up on much in daily driving. If you don't live in an area without, or with a lot of snow, like if you live here in Southern California, yeah, why not go for this? This seems like a pretty good deal. I know they've been very popular at BMW dealers. I've been seeing them at chargers all over. They seem to be engineered really well. The owners are happy. Everything I said in our i4 reviews, I pretty much stand behind after revisiting this, even just for a little bit. But I really think the power, whoa, the power is way more than I was expecting. Like, I don't know who needs more power than that. That's not slow. That's definitely faster than Model 3 rear-wheel drive. And maybe if it's not necessarily faster on paper, it feels faster because you put your foot down and it's instant. But the nice thing is it's not as crazy acceleration as the i4 is, so that you don't get this massive lash, like your neck isn't falling out of your body. So I am very pleased with this rear-wheel drive i4. I actually have a friend of mine who's shopping for a car, and sort of looking at a Model 3 or looking at other options, and this came up, and they were really interested in the i4, and you know, they were looking at the rear-wheel drive, and they're like, "Hey Kyle, what do you think of it?" And I'm like, "Well, I haven't driven it." So my impression is like hatchback, good-looking car. I know the front grille's controversial, but it's growing on me. At least the back of it looks pretty nice. I love the integration of software. The iDrive 8's pretty good. I mean, like, everything works here. I think this is great. Now, to answer your question, is this better than a Tesla Model 3? Overall, in America, no. In Europe, maybe, because the charging networks work a little bit better, but you have to factor in total ownership of this car. And there's a lot of people who will buy this car, enough people who will buy this car that, you know, just don't care about anything else other than not driving a Tesla for one reason or another. There's a lot of people who don't like Tesla, and they just want to drive something different, or they had a bad experience with them, or I don't know, they hate Elon, I don't know. But that's this car's main competitor, I would say. And if you're looking at a Tesla Model 3 alternative, I really don't think you're giving up much here. The biggest thing you'll be giving up is the public infrastructure when you go on road trips. And of course the peak charging speeds. So, you know, for the same money, you're looking at Model 3 dual motor, which you can't currently order right now. Actually, for the same money as this spec, you're looking at Model 3 Performance. This still gets, actually, maybe it doesn't get a tax credit because it's not final assembly here. Yeah, it's about the same money as a Model 3 Performance for a rear-wheel drive BMW i4. At that point, honestly, to be totally transparent, I would find it a hard, great turning radius, by the way, with no front motor on there. I would find it a hard sell to go for this over a Model 3 Performance, which would be so much faster. And you get the supercharger network, which to me is magical. So that's my impression. It's like, okay, if you're dead set on finding the best value, Model 3. If you want something a little bit different, a little bit higher quality, nicer feeling, nicer looking car, hatchback, but you're willing to give up on some of the acceleration specs, then this is the way to go. Because handling wise, like, it's fun and nimble, and it wants to dance, and like, it feels tight, and I'm really into the feeling of this. It feels like a real BMW, which is a totally different character than the i4 M50. And unfortunately, I don't have time to go shred this in the canyons. I don't think it's really needed. But there you go. It's a great Model 3 alternative. And yeah, if I see you driving one of these, I'll be like, oh, that's awesome. You didn't go the normal way. But also, I understand going with a Tesla over this 100%. But there you go. BMW did a great job on this car. Wish it was $10,000 less expensive, but that's what you get when you start dealing with German vehicles. They get pretty pricey pretty quickly. So that's just a very quick drive in the i4 40e. Thank you so much for joining another Out of Spec video and watching, and I will see you on another one soon. I'm really liking it. The brakes are good. Wow, this is like, this is fun. This puts a smile on your face. The i4 M50 did not do that for me. This is better. Lighter, nimbler. I don't know. Feels great.